The Lord be with you. And also with you. Let us pray. God, we give you thanks for this day and for the opportunities that it provides. As we gather, we ask for your continued presence among us as we look back at where we've been so far this year and we dream and look ahead to the coming months. We ask for your guidance and your grace. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you all for coming. Lots of people show up to forums when we look at pictures of buildings and numbers and things like that. So I like that. We're going to do a couple things today. We're going to look at statistics, for lack of a better term. If y'all were here in January, you remember we did a series of forums leading up to the annual meeting. One of them was a Rector's forum where I showed stats, and then we had a finance forum, and we did things like that. This is a mid-year. We did it last summer as well. Today is supposed to be vestry meeting day, but vestry takes off in July as long as things are going well. And knock on wood, this is 3 years in a row we've been able to do that. And so since vestry had the Sunday off, I told them they had to show up at 9:30 for a forum. And so they're here. So we'll also look at the financial report. And a last thing, we'll do an update on the building renovations. What you have in your hands, I only printed 20 copies, and I thought that was ambitious. Vestry has seen this, and so maybe Vestry, if you've already looked at it, you could pass it around to other people that want to see it. This is a portion of what Vestry receives every week, or every month. Every month, I put together a written report that includes things going on, a calendar of upcoming events, ongoing statistics. There's a finance report every month that DJ and Sue put together as treasurer, and that the finance committee, Gary's as chair, his group looks at and presents to the vestry. And then the wardens put in reports. I didn't have them do that this month. And then anything else. In this month, the anything else was the latest update from the architect. We had a meeting on, is that Thursday? It was a long time ago. We had a meeting on Thursday where we gave the next green light to the next thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. So what you're holding in your hands is that. I'm sorry, the blueprints in the back you can't see. I'll throw them up on here, and they're in color as well. So first off, any questions about things y'all want me to cover today? Or make sure we get to? All right, y'all are an easy group. Yeah. Yep, for sure. That was one of the two. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. So this is just a mission and outreach update. If you were here, I only mentioned this one Sunday. We raised $14,000 for the organization's now called Undo Medical Debt. That was able, once they went and did their magic, we got a report a month or so ago. Nearly $2 million of medical debt was forgiven, all because of $14,000. So yeah, that's wonderful. So don't be surprised if you don't see that as a future Lenten outreach project, because I think bang for the buck, that's pretty high up there for that. Of course, I have to update us on cans of corn. Through mid-year, we're at just over 3,000 cans of corn that have been donated. And so that continues. Yeah. And so I've been told, is Jim in here? I heard Jim earlier. Was he at church? Yeah. We had thrown out there how much are we supposed to gather a week? Is it 150 cans? He's like, can we try to get that up to 200? I was like, take it easy, Jim. But as you know, last week they had like 350 or some people come through. That was they didn't have it the week before, and so it was a compressed thing. How many were there Friday? Were you there Friday, or Sue? What? This past Friday? So 220. So it kind of jumped up quite a bit. It had been. If you've been tracking along with, we've made these announcements, it had been, 120 families and 150 families and 180 families. Now that average keeps going up. So the need's increasing. We, of course, have continued to step up when folks have asked us, and they love the corn and the red envelopes, which I think this may be the last week, if they're still out there, for this quarter that we're collecting that. So that's just an overview of mission and outreach. We also still do last week. We had about 25 people pack those 150 sack lunches. Today, we've started a new outreach project, the blessing bags. If you remember, It's something we did as part of City Week. It's hygiene kits. We're working with John Peter Smith Hospital, the county hospital system. And half of the ones we make go to their street health team. The other half go in the back of the church for, basically, you got to get here at 8:30 when we put those out, or else you don't get one. And so if you want to come to church early so you can get a hygiene kit, it's hygiene items, necessary items for folks experiencing homelessness. And so the youth is leading that. They're going to pack those. They're going to help pack those. Everyone else is invited as well. Same routine. It'll be set up in the small parish hall. We'll put those together. And then you can take some with you to keep in your car for when you pass that person on the corner. Any questions about outreach? This is total visitors from last year. You can't really see these numbers. We finished last year, what was it? Oh, hold on. I don't want to spoil. Finished last year with 309 total visitors, works out to about 5.5 a week. So that's 309 over a year. So far this year, oh my goodness, we're at 226 through half of the year. And so the number of visitors that join us, some of that's skewed because this right here is when I had my family reunion, right? And so there were a whole lot of Bentrups here that are never coming back. So the number's skewed just a little bit. But we do, if you just look around, we continue to see visitors come in. And so everything from the greeters and ushers who help make them feel welcome, Io, who you do a wonderful job. You've been here a long time, and so you know folks who haven't been around. Because for me, sometimes I go greet someone, and they've been around for a long time. They just haven't been here in the last 3 years, in which case they're new to me, and so I put my foot in my mouth. So people like Io and others can help recognize that. I've explained before how our welcome ministry works. It starts with the greeters and ushers. And Liza, if there's a family, she helps make sure they know where the activity bags and things are. I encourage folks to fill out the white contact cards. We have not gotten 226 contact cards, right? So it's a very small percentage of those that we get back. But when we do get those, it's usually 1 or 2 a week. I send them an email Sunday afternoon, welcoming them, yada, yada. And then I send that number to Christine here. And Christine has some wonderful conversations. She says so. And I hear back folks who return. Sometimes it's because of the conversation Christine has had. And so that's how our welcome ministry works. And then people get plugged in and they stick around. And we'll look at the numbers of folks sticking around a little bit in a minute. Any question about visitors or welcome ministry? There's been some talk about what else we can do. There used to be the bread ministry and like what could that look like now? And there's some of those conversations ongoing, but what we're doing is somewhat successful. And I think folks are feeling connected and we're getting people plugged in and we're getting people in this community. So that's that for visitors. We're outpacing last year, which is always good. This is average Sunday attendance. And so you'll see this is just people in the pews. We'll talk about total average Sunday attendance because how we calculate that has changed, but these numbers won't work that way if I put them both together. So this is people in the pews in person. And so you'll see COVID, right? Everything dropped off a cliff and we were like at 60 people on a Sunday. I came right around here in 2021, and that's when we were still registering for services. It was like 25 people. It was a whole artificially limited thing, right, for good reason. Then we slowly lessened that. And so last year, we finished the year in person. See if I can do this without messing up. 138 at the end of the year. And so far this year, just for the 6 months of this year, we're at 149. And so numbers keep moving up. Last year, it was about a 15% increase in ASA from 2022 to 2023. This year so far, it's a little less than 10% growth there. But the way we measure ASA has changed. I don't have that on here. I must have missed that slide. Okay. We now incorporate online attendance as well. And so for the last couple of years, you basically bump those numbers up by 30 because that's what we're roughly averaging. And so last year, I think our reported ASA was in the mid-160s. I don't remember exactly. This right now, our ASA is about 178 once you add in those people who worship with us online, which sometimes includes y'all, right? It's not just, someone in Sheboygan. It's, Gary when he's traveling. You're still here, right, when y'all are at home. And so right, the whole idea of online attendance, there's lots of debate out there. Priests love to argue about really, really stupid things. And this is one of the things, right? We're incarnational. We have to be in person. Yeah, yes, I get that. But there are people who are deeply connected to this community because Chuck sits back there in the back and hits a button. And so, but just for comparison's sake, this does not include that. We're actually mid-170s for that. And just so you can see how that's been working for year over year. So we track these numbers. Like I have a spreadsheet that does a rolling 5-week average, a rolling 52-week average. So we can look and see a snapshot of, we don't just have to wait until Easter falls off to, let those numbers die down. We can see general trends. And so this is the 52-week rolling average from a year ago. And so this number here, which is 131, it represents July 2022 to July 2023. Does that make sense? Y'all following that? So for that 52-week average a year ago is 131. Where we are right now, like I said, 149. So that's, again, about a 15% increase or so if I'm doing that math right. And you'll see, right, like Christmas, Easter, we get those bumps. It comes back, but then we still see a gradual increase. And so, Christine calling those people because they turn in the card, those 260 people that visit, apparently a portion of them are sticking around. And so we're seeing growth there. Another way we measure growth, and just to see, is Easter attendance. Again, I don't have data on the online attendance for 21-22, but that's about 286 people both years, which just seems really weird to me. Y'all are very consistent people. We had a little bit of dip in 2023. I'm not sure what was going on there, but once you add in the online people, it jumped up. But then this past year, if you were here on Easter, you remember it was quite a full house. And so we were almost a full congregation bigger on Easter Sunday. And then you add in the thing. And then Easter is one thing, right? It's our second biggest service of the year. Then we got Christmas. Christmas, these numbers aren't just close to exact. 2021, 2022, 326, 328. Like, this is crazy, y'all. Maybe it's like ushers just don't worry about it. And like DJ's back there at Christmas, 326. Writes down the number. That's exactly, like, I'm not counting these people. And so, so for this, last year we have Christmas, right? It continued the increase. Oh my goodness. 376. We haven't had Christmas this year, right? And so this is where I've put Easter from last year. Christmas has always outpaced Easter by a considerable amount. Christmas is a lot bigger Sunday, or a lot bigger day. And so I can anticipate that our in-person attendance for Christmas, if we're not at 400, I'll be disappointed. I mean, I'll love whoever shows up for Christmas. Absolutely. We will celebrate the coming of our King. But the way the trends are going, get here early on Christmas for a seat. Last year, do what? Did you say something? Oh. These are sacramental acts from last year. If you remember, we had a big confirmation. So far this year, haven't had confirmation. We have people lined up to do it. I'm just waiting on bishops. So those of you who have sisters, like, call them. Be like, hey. No, we're getting in that's a whole nother day. And we can talk about reunification stuff in a minute. Baptisms, burials were about where we've been in the past. And now what y'all probably all showed up to talk about is finances. There's a whole thing. DJ puts in just to know how good the numbers were this month. The way this normally works is the week of vestry meeting, DJ sends this report out. And then Michael sends a whole bunch of questions in return. And then at the meeting, there's some conversation. DJ sent this thing out yesterday or 2 days ago. Michael said, looks great, thanks. And I'm like, hey, this is good. We are good. And so you'll see pledge income, and we'll talk more specifics. Pledge income is above plan. Non-pledge is below plan, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Everything else is roughly there. Then down here, expenses, we're under plan on expenses. So income exceeds, right? Expenses is to the good. What's the opposite of exceeds? Below, yeah. And then, so that means doesn't exceed. There you go. And so our net income, which is like the checking account kind of, that's above plan as well. So both due to y'all's faithful generosity and the good stewardship of wardens and staff, we're in a good position. And so DJ in the report has some top line items where he summarizes things because he knows Gavin can't read spreadsheets. And so he puts it in bullet points just for Gavin's sake. And so this is what I just said. This month, right, income exceeded expenses. And so when it talks about the cash fund balance, that's essentially our checking account, right? We have different savings accounts where there's numbers even bigger than this for different things. But this is like, right, I'm getting this right. This is like, if all else fails, we can get through several months because we've got cash on hand, essentially. That number keeps going up. At the end of the year, we figure out what we put forward to next year's budget, right? So you'll see income was above plan, expenses below plan. So that's the highlight for June. This is a paragraph about pledges. And this shame-free zone, we're just putting numbers out there, and I don't know I don't know what these stats represent. So far, we're at 50% of the year, right? June 30 was 50% of the year. We've received 61% of pledges. Some of that is prepaid pledges, right? Some people just paid the whole thing up front. Other people have paid more than they pledged. There's some of that. Even with that, there's still, what was it here? 23 pledging units, which these are the numbers we use. I hate it. It makes this whole thing feel like a business. But a pledging unit's a family. It's right. Your family turns in a pledge card. You've automatically become a pledging unit. That's just how we talk about it. There's 23 of those that are below their expected pledge, which that happens. That's happened to me in my life. That's happened to a lot of people for any different number of reasons. Some of it's a timing issue. Some of it's a pastoral issue, right? And so this is just for the finance committee and the vestry to know. Because if there's a whole bunch of pastoral issues out there, it is what it is. We just have to figure out what we're going to do about it, right? And so, we send out quarterly statements for folks, both for their tax records and as gentle reminders. And so folks should be receiving those soon to see where they are with that. But again, this is a situation, if there's some, right, and we talk about this at stewardship time, you're putting a number on a piece of paper, you're not signing a contract, right? There's no enforcement mechanism, there's nothing. So if something comes up, and like you get a raise, yes, please bump that number up. We will gladly take that, right? You win the lottery, please talk to me. And I will tell you about the biblical principle of the tithe. And, but if something else is going on, right? Talk to Sue, talk to me. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? It helps us to know what's going on and what to expect because that lessens surprises if money gets tight. Fortunately, right now, money's not tight, but it still helps us in planning. And so that's all I'm going to say about that for now. This is just looking at the budget going forward. You have a copy of the remainder of the year budget. And even if income, pledge and non-pledge, stay the same, where pledge is slightly above non-pledge income, which people throwing cash in the plate, or newcomers. Right? If newcomers start giving regularly, they haven't pledged. So that goes into non-pledge. Even if that stays where it is, which is below, we're still going to be okay because our budget had a surplus in it. The surplus, you said, was $13,000. Right now, we're projecting hopefully a slightly larger surplus at the end. But even if things don't improve, which I don't like using that word, but even if the pledge stays as we've seen, we'll have a balanced budget at the end of the year, right? So and remember, even if we have a deficit budget, we have a lot of money in the bank to cover that. So vestry's not sweating this. Please don't hear me saying you don't have to keep giving. I'm just trying to be honest with you. Please, because this is a stewardship sermon right here. You don't give to make sure we can turn the lights on, right? You give because it's what you feel God is calling you to do. It does help us keep the lights on. But giving is a spiritual act. What vestry does with it and all that, that's a whole different matter. But because we're kind of in a good financial position, I don't think that means God is saying something different to you, maybe. Yeah, okay. Any questions about the finances? Any specific questions? This is just a broad overview. And in there you can see current balances and budgeted versus actual for everything. For everything from my professional expenses to what we spent on communication to everything in there. Virtually everything is under budget. We've had to do a lot of work on the property. And so for a long time, buildings and grounds was wildly over budget, but they're actually closing that gap pretty closely. Yeah. And so things happen, right? We can budget, but we can't budget knowing that everything's going to fall apart at once. But Dick and Rick have been good stewards, and so they've closed that gap some. Any questions about, yeah?
I don't understand Service Sunday anymore. I know I turn in that request and we get paid.
Yeah.
But what do we have in funds, or how do I know that? And if before we had an amount every year that we knew what we had to spend.
Yeah, and so that switched, and so that gets into reunification, which we can talk about after this. So in the previous diocese, Service Sunday was funded by a grant from the Episcopal Church in North Texas. And so y'all would get $2,500. I forget the amount, right? The new diocese doesn't have that granting program. And so instead of saying Service Sunday, tough luck, that just comes out of outreach. And so you'll see in there the outreach budget. And so there's a conversation. Outreach, we always have more than we spend in a year because outreach is funded. Currently, it's funded partially by, is it the Christmas offering? Thanksgiving, yeah, the Thanksgiving offering. It's one of the special offerings we do. It's also in the budget. It's important to me that we're working budgeted funds, not just special giving. I want to get everything coming out of annual stewardship. So it's in there, and there's thousands of dollars in there. Some of it goes to Presbyterian Night Shelter. Some of it goes for the stuff we're buying for this other stuff. But that's a conversation you and I can have about, I can stand here and tell you we're going to have the money for whatever you need. Without a doubt. That's all you need to know. We'll find. We have plenty, and we keep a buffer in there. And some of that is we keep that buffer until we know how much we're going to have for the next year. And then at the end of the year, if we know we've got enough to cover everything we need, we can spend off more. So it's no longer its own fund, right? Because it doesn't get that separate income. Now it's part of outreach, which is where Presbyterian Night Shelter, where Service or City Week, where all that stuff comes from. It's now in with that. All right? Do you trust me? Okay, good. That might be a different conversation if you didn't. Yeah. Yeah. And so that you see the cash, the available cash balance and all that, that's money. Vestry could just kind of spend that. Right? We do have these other temporarily restricted funds that come through and they go for whatever it is. And then there's the permanently restricted funds that folks have given for a new building or for the choir, or Memorial Garden's another one of those as well. So there's different kind of pockets of money that we work with. Any other questions about finances? Okay, I don't have a slide up here about reunification, but like we're now part of the Episcopal Diocese of Texas, and we have been for almost 2 years at this point. It hadn't changed anything, right? Like we're still doing our deal over here. It allowed us to get Gavin a curate, right? And so that's through a diocesan grant. Gavin is a cut rate priest. It's like a buy one get one half off deal. No, it comes from one of the Diocese of Texas. We've joked about this. They have considerable resources, and one of their things is the Bishop Quinn Foundation. The Bishop Quinn Foundation pays for a lot of things, one of which is curate support. And so you can look in there and see we essentially, St. Martin's contributes half of what Gavin made, like the cost of him being here. A diocesan grant, we get $10,000 a quarter from the diocese just for Gavin. And so that's a 2-year program. And we've talked about this. This isn't a surprise. We're not making any announcements here. But Gavin started a year ago, almost exactly. So we're at that halfway point. And this is the point where like the little hatchling like starts to learn to fly and does all these things, right? And like we trust him and like he's going to nosedive. Like I can't wait to hear about 8:30 today when I wasn't there. Like, so we're halfway there. And then that'll have continued conversations, right? Curacy is always a unique animal. If he stays beyond June 30 of next year, Vestry and Finance Committee have to have a different conversation, frankly. And so, because we no longer get that support, the support is for 2 years. And so and plus, right, like Gavin's here in a training capacity. He's learning who he is as a priest, how to be a priest. He's obviously more gifted than being my associate, right, our associate. And so that's just one of the things. They just placed a bunch of curates from this most recent class. It's one of the things that Diocese of Texas does really well. Because most dioceses, they send you to seminary and they say, good luck. And like from day one, you have to glad hand like virtually every bishop that shows up on campus to make sure you can get a job someday. Texas, you don't have to worry about that. They know that you need some training wheels. So that's one of the ways that the Diocese of Texas has benefited us. Yeah.
I want to add on to that because you don't say some of the things that, having been around for a long time. Going into the Diocese of Texas, they pay all of his medical and Gavin's, and we used to have to pay that out of our budget.
Yeah. And for me, it's full family. It's me and the boys. It's like $18,000 a year.
I just want everybody to understand the fact that there were some incredible benefits of me becoming a part of the Diocese of Texas. And I see them all the time. I mean, they also, the first year, we did not have to pay an assessment. And in the old diocese, we were the 3rd largest church in the Diocese of North Texas, and we had a really tough assessment. And when they said, oh, we have to pay an assessment for a year, I'm just like, yeah. Hallelujah.
Yeah, the assessment, you can maybe see it in the budget. It's 44, something like that. It's around there. That's what we pay per year. And it's going to stick around that. That's less than we paid in the Episcopal Church in North Texas because the calculations are different. But we had a year where we didn't have to pay that. I think it was actually a little bit more than a year. And so if you see, like, there's a vestry discretionary fund, there's like money set aside, an emergency fund. It's kind of largely thanks to that and some other things. So there's been some benefits there. The Diocese of Texas, they own lots of land in Texas, and land in Texas spits up oil. And so, like, they sold a hospital system, right? Like, they've been good stewards for generations. And so they have some foundations that are very generous. Our health insurance is covered by a grant from one of those foundations. It covers lots of different things like that. Someone had a hand up just now. Yeah, Eloise.
What is the function of the building that is in Fort Worth that is said to be the Diocese of Texas? Are we no longer the North? We were called the Episcopal Diocese, but we're not North Texas.
diocese no longer exists.
So what is the function of that building?
That building is new. There was no building. When we were a previous diocese, they were officing out of churches. The Diocese of Texas spends a considerable amount of money for office space. And so that we have Katie Sherrod is communications director for this region. Other people who come in to work from this region can office out of there. Joseph Roberts is the office manager there. They're planting a church there, and so that's also a worship space. They're having church right now, actually, in that space. And it will be the office of the bishop of this region, whenever that bishop manifests him or herself. And that's the question. And so, right, I think I've showed these maps for Diocese of Texas. We now have 4 regions: East Texas, Tyler area, South Central Texas, Houston area, and then the Austin area. Those those regions all have regional bishops. So Episcopal Church is really weird. We have a bishop diocesan, that's Andy. That's who was here to ordain Gavin. You all met him. He's diocesan bishop. He, every 3 years, has to visit every single church. So we had him for the ordination, but we'll probably get him again. This diocese is so big. I think I joked before, the first 2 bishops literally died from exhaustion. And so then they started adding in additional bishops. And so we have 2 what are called suffragan bishops. One, his office is in Tyler. That's Bishop Jeff Fisher. That's who ordained me. And then the other, Bishop Kay Ryan, is in, her office is in Houston. Austin. Yeah, sorry. Her sister corrected me. Her office is in Austin. And then we also, so that's 2 suffragans. Bishop diocesan, convention gets together and says, this is our bishop. He is the bishop of Texas, right? These others are bishops in Texas or bishops of Texas, but like they're not, Andy. So we have the diocesan. We get to make that bishop, right? We can make 2 additional bishops. Those are called suffragans. So Jeff Fisher was a parish priest, and he was elected a bishop. And so he moved from a church in Waco to the bishop's office in East Texas. Kay Ryan was canon to the ordinary, and then she was elected and made a bishop. And so she moved from an office in Houston over to Austin. That's all the bishops we can make right now. We can make 3 total. We're too big for that, and so we need additional bishops. So what we can do is assisting bishops. We're familiar with that around here because that's what Scott was called. That's what the previous bishops that helped out around here, they were provisional and they were that's someone who is a bishop already and for whatever reason helps out in a place. And so we have Bishop Hector Monteroso, who he was bishop diocesan in Costa Rica, and he was young when he was consecrated bishop. He retired and wanted to move to lovely Houston, Texas. And so he is full-time, he's a full-on bishop. It's not like a retirement job. He's an assisting bishop. That's what we can do up here for right now. And so there's, right, it's kind of a small pool of people who, A, are bishops, B, have been bishops long enough they can leave their current place, C, aren't too old that church pension group's going to kick them out, and D, want to move to Fort Worth. Although that's probably the largest of the pools, people who want to move to Fort Worth. And so Bishop Doyle is there's an open call for folks, and they've been looking for folks. That hasn't happened yet. We don't have a bishop for this region. That next bishop will office in near Southside, Fort Worth. And they'll be primarily responsible for pastoral care and oversight of these churches, but they all share in that work, right? The chief pastor of the diocese is Bishop Doyle. But as far as Gavin and I are concerned, when we need pastoral support, we go to Jeff Fisher, right? When we need support with other things, we go to Kay Ryan, right? They delegate those authorities. And so we have touch points with all these bishops. But when Bishop, what's her name, finally takes residence in the Fort Worth office, they'll be the one that we probably have the most contact with. At General Convention, the Diocese of Texas proposed a resolution to add a third suffragan bishop. Because wouldn't you know it, way back when, like 70 years ago, the Diocese of Texas said, hey, let's do this thing called suffragans. And then like 40 years ago, they're like, hey, let's now let us have 2 suffragans. And now that's no longer enough, so the Diocese of Texas has gone back and said, hey, let's do 3 suffragans. That was the very first step. In 3 more years, it would have to be read again, and then it can be acted upon. So we can't make another bishop until at least 3 years from now. And so we'll do something in the meantime. Bishop Doyle is trying to be creative in what he's thinking, because if we don't find a bishop who fits those criteria and wants to move here, we have to be creative. And he's had conversations with heads of congregations up here about what that could look like. We're going to have a confirmation. We're going to get on the schedule, right? We're going to do all these things. It just is a little bit different. So that's where we are. Once that happens and we have a bishop for the North region, then like reunification will really be finished. Diocesan convention. Who are delegates for next year? Who was elected delegates this past year? Christine? Yeah. Who else? I'd have to go look and see who all it was. That diocesan council will be in Fort Worth. So in February. And so some of that, like, come meet people and hang out and volunteer, right? Gavin's going to be in charge of liturgy. And he had a heck of a time getting people to serve in Waco. And I've told him, if we have a problem getting acolytes, getting people to do all these things, then like Denise and Phyllis have failed at their jobs. Yeah. So we're hosting the next diocesan council. It'll be in Fort Worth. Diocesan summer camp, right? A Briggs girl just went down to Camp Allen. My boys have gone to Camp Allen. I encourage you to check that stuff out. People around here have gone to like the Needlepoint retreat. Jan, you went to one of those. There's all sorts of things that happen down at Camp Allen. DOK retreats, Altar Guild retreats. It's where they have clergy conferences. That's in Navasota, Texas, about 3.5 hours from here. They do lots of things there. Any questions about our diocese reunification, general convention, anything like that? All right. So if this makes sense to you, you should have been at the meeting Thursday because you could have helped us. We've seen lots of pretty pictures. Most of the pretty pictures have been for the new church. That's like phase 3 down the road. We're still working on the first phases. And so we came in with a plan to like do the whole building, right? Everything, all over. And then, right, best laid plans, you get the price tag and you're like, yeah, I was kidding about that. And so you'll see like from here, where we are right now, none of this is no longer in scope for now, right? Because what we're doing with this renovation, not here, there, the parish hall, we're doing it with cash on hand, right? We have several $100,000 in building renovation funds. And so what this represents is what we are pretty confident we can do without raising money. When we start to do this, and when we start to do the church, we will be raising money. So just be ready, right? But for now, the main goals of this renovation, nursery, we'll talk about in a minute. 2 main goals. Upgrade and expand the nursery, because those numbers of visitors and all of that, we got tons of kids coming in, right? You can see the kids that go to Children's Chapel, right? Sometimes 25 of them were bursting at the seams. They had to take over the room next to them in here for the nursery. So nursery's 1. 2 is to move the offices. Not just so I can have an office without wood paneling, but I mean, that's not nothing. But once the offices are moved over here, then we can do the church. Because if you remember, the church expansion can't happen until we can push through the offices. So our goals here, expand and improve the nursery, move the offices over, because that gets us ready for the church phase. And so that's what this looks like. We'll start down here. The offices move down here. So this is the corner where, yeah, this is roughly. So that corner over there, that would become Annika's office, right? The corner, she'll have window frontage out to the parking lot so she can see where people coming in. Workroom with copier, me and Gavin's offices. The classroom stays largely the same over there. We'll talk about what that can be. And then restrooms need to be renovated because we're not in code, which is fine right now, but once we start moving dirt over here, we have to get into code. Finance manager's office, so Sue's office is going to come over here where the youth room is kind of currently. And then this was a hard decision we had to make. This was going to be a conference room, right? We don't think we have the money for that. And so the yarn room and Liza's office are going to stay for now. All of this is for now, right? Like none of this is final. If someone wants to write me a $100,000 check, we'll get a conference room, right? But Liza's office and the yarn room stay in that plan. The kitchen stays the same too. We're not going to touch the kitchen because all the folks who work in there say it's functional as it is. We're going to get a dishwasher to help in there, but that's going to stay untouched. This up here, the small parish hall, roughly 2/3 of the small parish hall becomes the nursery. And that'll be divided in half with like a Dutch door between, one for babies and crawlers, one for toddlers and stuff. And y'all know what a nursery is. There'll be a restroom between, so that's new plumbing that has to go in, changing table, all that, right? Like, so a couple things that happens there. We're paying extra for soundproofing around there so that, like when the babies are sleeping, the toddlers don't wake them up, right? Like in some of the offices, we're not paying for the extra soundproofing, right? Because we don't necessarily need it. We want to make sure the nursery is somewhere where like folks can get a nap and all that. Did you have a question specifically about the nursery?
I did, and I think you may have answered it, but what I want to know is there a sink
Yep.
in the bathroom?
Yeah, bathroom has a sink and a toilet. There's also going to be sinks in both nurseries. The changing stations, I think the working plan right now is changing station outside so that it doesn't take up the toilet area. And so someone who's changing can also still be part of keeping eyes on. Because, right, there's safeguarding questions that come into play. Once someone leaves to go change or help with the bathroom, they're no longer one of the two people in there. And so staffing has to change. And so and if you don't know what safeguarding is, we can have another conversation. We have very clear guidelines about how we operate, both with kids and adults. We have to have windows and all the things. There's a whole thing. So yeah, the current drawings, sink and toilet in the bathroom, sinks and changing stations outside in the nurseries themselves.
Maybe that is another question then. Okay, so if a teacher needs to take the child to the potty, how many, do you need 2 teachers to do that? Or
No, they don't go in with them.
Okay.
But
they're not part of still people watching?
No, and so the way it normally is, Liza can maybe answer this more fully. We have 2 nursery staff and then helpers, essentially, which are teenagers, right? Like her kids, my kids, other people like that. And so there's always, there's usually 4 staff on a Sunday morning. Is that right? 2 helpers and 2 adults?
It could be
3, yeah.
So definitely 2 adults.
Yeah.
For the minimum. And then the assistants help out because they're entertaining the toddlers, the older toddlers.
Yeah.
And the adults are always assisting with the baby age.
Yeah. And that's in the current setup. When we have 2 discrete spaces, we'll bring in additional, right? Like staffing is only because it's what we think we need. It's not because we're limp, We've grown that, like we've added in the teen helper program, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So Rose Ackley and Katie Gott, their co-nursery director, they both work there and they're thinking through all these things in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions about this? So a couple things that happen here, just so you know. We're losing a secondary meeting space. And so that was going to be the conference room, but we're no longer going to have that. And so what the working plan right now is going to, and the other thing, we're losing the youth room. And so this is kind of musical chairs. Youth are going to go back where they were, right there. And so library shuffles down here. That first classroom, which is now one of the nurseries, which also becomes a conference room, right? We'll have big tables. It'll be a secondary meeting space, vestry meetings, lectionary Bible study, things like that will happen down here. Yeah, so we are losing a little bit of space just because of the reorganization of this stuff. But right, the music rooms don't ever get used. They're strictly storage. Everything musically happens up in the choir loft now. So this is extra, like all that would take is a Saturday cleaning it up, and we would have 2 classrooms. Godly Play stays. Godly Play won't be touched. Yeah, it's down there. None of this will change in the renovation. The only thing that's happening is the library will have to move because youth is moving there because they're getting kicked out. Yeah.
And these double doors go away?
No, they're still within, well, they went away in this, but no, that's part of the cost savings now. And so maybe eventually, that's a security, that was a security decision. And that was a tough debate because those are great for when you're bringing things in for receptions and things, but it's also hard because it's an extra set of doors that get propped open. And so we made the decision to leave it both for cost and because it's something we can add in later. Yeah. Any other questions about this? So what happens is we met with the general contractor and the architects on Thursday. The architects took all this feedback and they're coming up with final drawings, right? So the engineered drawings that said that'll take a couple weeks, maybe up to a month, I think is what they said. They'll give that to the contractor. The contractor will start lining things up and getting things ready. That'll take a month or 2 to get all of that. And then we're ready to start. And some of that depends, right? Like, do we want to start construction right before Advent? Maybe not. You know, so then the timeline becomes when do we have things going on and all of that. But by next July, when we have this meeting, hopefully half the parish hall will be renovated by then. And then maybe we'll be talking about money for the thing next door. Any questions about the renovation?
Say by next July, have half of it done or
half of this building,
okay.
Like all of this stuff, hopefully within the next year, I would think. I said half because this half of the building's not really being touched. All right, it's 10:20 and our preacher already left. So any last questions for this? Thank you all for your time. If you look over that and have questions, you can always come to me. Mary Beth, the senior warden, she also went to go get ready, I guess. You can always reach out to us, anyone on vestry. Right. Thank you all very much.
Okay.